Hello everyone, today I'm going to be painting on two different colored Pantone postcards. I'm very excited for this video. Before I get started, be sure to like and subscribe, and let's see what I come up with. First, I started by flipping through the postcards, and there are 100 of these bad boys, so there was a lot of colors and options to choose from, but two particularly stood out to me: Seafoam Green and Pirate Black. Now, Seafoam Green, we all know this color from the Crayola crayon box, and trying to be quirky as kids, like, oh yeah, this is my favorite color because I want to be different, that kind of thing. So I decided to pull this one, and also because I felt very inspired by the names of these two. So you'll have to keep watching to see what I decide on creating for both of them. But I started off with the Seafoam Green by creating a sort of acrylic wash, which is basically just really watered down acrylic paint. And I started with that on this Seafoam Green and kind of spread it around to create an almost water-like effect. After I finalized putting on those watery details, I needed to let this dry for a long while because this postcard is actually pretty glossy, and so the paint needed a lot of time to dry. So I decided to switch over to the Pirate Black in the meantime. And for this one, I'm not doing a pirate, but I did feel inspired by the Jolly Roger flag, and we're doing a skull. This was pretty challenging on this postcard because of how glossy it is. The paint was not building up unless it was dry, and it was taking a very long time to dry. So it took a long time to get any sort of solid base colors, and then building was pretty much impossible because I couldn't blend it on top of dried paint, but if I tried to put wet paint on top of wet paint, it was just taking up the wet paint underneath. So I'm not really sure how to go about this next time, but I do like the effect that it has because the paint that I added is matte, but the postcard is glossy. So in the end, you'll see me showing you the end results in the light, and you can tell what I've painted versus what's the color of the postcard because the postcard is glossy and my paint is matte. So I thought that was actually a pretty cool effect. The skull took a really long time to build, but I kept going with it. I kept thinking in my head about this one that people joke about how their art goes through an ugly phase, and well, this had a lot of ugly phases, and it took a lot of course correction, but I'm very happy with how it turned out in the end, and I just stuck with black and white for this one. I considered adding some yellow in to make the skull look a bit more aged, but I decided against it, one, because that just makes it more complicated, and two, because I wanted to keep it black and white simple just for the sake of the pirate theme. This was definitely a challenge for me due to the materials, the lack of time it's been since I've painted something like this, and how detailed it is, and how small it is, but here we go. It finally starts looking like a skull at this point, and we can see it coming together. I make a lot of corrections still later just to change up the shape, make sure it's looking and reading the way I want it to, and then I deepen a lot of the shadows and correct those as well, and just add some more depth to it, make it look a little more three-dimensional and less flat, and perhaps a little more spooky. I tried to add some cracks in the skull, but I somehow had white on my brush instead of black, so oops, but that's okay. Nothing we can't keep working through, which we did. So then I kept on working, adding more details until it was finally looking the way that I wanted it to, and after I added my shadows, I added back some highlights, and I'm pretty happy with how this is looking. I decided to paint the flowers in that same kind of style, a little bit choppy, a little bit messy, but also you can tell that there's a lot of intention and thought into where I'm putting each brush stroke. Even though the card is already black, I decided to add some of my black paint to the outside edges to add a different texture since, the paper is glossy and my paint is matte. But then I also decided to add in some polka dots. I was kind of debating whether or not this is going to make it worse or better, and I don't know, maybe that's an opinion thing, but I think it made it better. So after that, I moved this one over to dry, and I went back to working on the Seafoam Green postcard. For this postcard, the Seafoam Green one, I wanted to emulate seafoam. So I decided before to create some water patterns. So that's what I was doing before with all of those strokes and stuff. I was trying to create a somewhat of a current in the water so that way I could trace a flow of water with the seafoam. So then now I'm just taking white and stippling it, so making a whole bunch of dots all over where I think the seafoam should go. And I did have a reference for this so I could see what seafoam does and how it bunches and collects together. I seriously remember this color being like everyone's favorite color in elementary school, because if you had that like expansive bunch of Crayola crayons, then this color was in there, and I don't know why, but it was like everyone's favorite color. I remember it being a little more blue than this, but I don't know. I mean, I guess not, but that's why I added some deeper types of blue greens in with the ripples, so that way I could still make it blue. In my opinion, this just looks pretty green on its own, like the Seafoam Green. Like, I've never seen water that color in the ocean or anything, and I could be wrong. Send me some pictures of the ocean if you've seen it this color, but I've never seen that. So I decided to add more blue, make it more oceany to me, and then I just kept on going and adding the different ripples and seafoam. I let the names of these two postcards inspire me quite a bit, but a lot of the postcards in the box, in the set, are not named anything, they're just numbers. So I'm gonna have to be a lot more creative with those ones and coming up with design ideas, and maybe it'll even give me more freedom, though I won't feel so boxed in, because if it's Seafoam Green and I paint a jungle, I'll feel a little weird about that. So maybe it'll give me more freedom, but it'll also challenge my creativity. So I'm excited to go through this with you guys. This is going to be a continuing series, and I'm really excited to keep creating these individual pieces and to eventually have a collection of 100 custom painted postcards that I made over the course of a very, very long time. To add to the water effect, I decided to add a couple of highlights, and then it was pretty much done after that point, and I really like how this looked. I'm always hard on my art because it's mine, and your own worst critic. But I asked my husband, I sent him pictures of these. I was like, can you tell what this is? And he knew this was seafoam right away, and I was kind of worried about it, so that eased my mind. He's my biggest supporter, and yeah, so I took the tape off, very satisfying. And then I also decided to obviously remove the tape off of the other one, and then I could show you guys an up close and more detailed shot of the finished pieces. For the final product, I really like that you can see the matte paint versus the glossy postcard, and I was considering varnishing them, but I really like that distinction, so I'm gonna leave them as they are. But here they are. Please like and subscribe, and thanks for watching, and be sure to join me next time.